Hey there, it's Michael. I'm going to talk briefly about what I call the wave. And basically, the wave is talking about a process that takes you out of the present moment and that puts you into either a state of eustress or good stress or a state of distress. A lot of times when we have waves of experiences or waves of thoughts, if they're good, we don't actually generally have an acknowledgement that this ever happened unless it's a very high level of euphoria, or if it's something that has a lot of novelty or something that really made an impact. But we have a lot of these positive things that happen throughout the day that we really don't give an acknowledgement to, and that create good feelings within us, but that we don't really actually realize that these feelings are happening. And the same for negative experiences or negative emotions. Throughout the day, we have low level of these types of experiences, things that just aggravate us a little bit. And they just kind of, just like a wave, they come, they happen, and they just go. That's not what we're going to talk about here today. What we're going to talk about here today mostly is the negative waves that are so profound throughout your day that they actually crest and bubble up at the top. And then what happens there is you have a response. And what this response is, it's an emotional response, and it is like a protective mechanism or escapism mechanism to try and help stop the wave from going any further. Either that, or it's to try and, once the wave has crested, to diminish it or crush it. And these behaviors are actually negative behaviors. And it's just something that we've done for a long time. And usually what happens is that at the top of this wave, we realize that we're lonely, that we're angry, we're sad, we're stressed, we're tired, maybe bored. And so what happens is, at this point, at the top of the wave, is when most of the mechanisms or behaviors that we do on a chronic level throughout our lifetime, and that continue from youth, and most of these behaviors just kind of travel with you through the end of your life, unless you have an awareness and a plan to stop these things from happening. This is when it happens at the top of the wave. So let me explain a little bit more on the dry erase board. So hopefully you can see this, and hopefully it comes out well, because I would really like to be able to explain this in a visual format. So let's just say that this is time here. This could be from birth to death, or it could be from just a period of today. So let's just take a snapshot of just something that would occur. So let's just say you're here, you're in the present moment. Present moment, right? And then something happens. And basically, it kind of looks like this. Let me use a purple pen here for the wave. So it goes like this, kind of crests. And then this kind of goes like this. And if we're lucky enough, we get back to the present moment. So let me just kind of break this down for a second here. So, like I was saying a second ago, we'll use green for good. So a lot of times there's good things that happen, you know. You run into somebody that you haven't seen in a while, you have a nice breakfast, whatever, you know, and it causes a positive emotional response. And basically it just kind of gets you back like that. So it never really crests, there's no wave. And sometimes there's negative ones that occur like this also. Little aggravating thing happens and you just let it go, you know, because we don't let everything bother us to a high degree, just some things. And when things bother us to a high degree, this is when we have a tendency to make bad decisions. So what we'll do is we'll say that what happens here is this is, we'll call this an experience to emotion, or a thought to emotion. And that's basically this right here. So what happens is an experience or an event occurs and it causes a negative response. Internally, we have a negative emotional response. So it doesn't actually have to be an experience or event. It could just be a thought. And most of the time, it is a thought. And most of the thoughts that we have are recurring thoughts that we have throughout our lifetime. So really, to get a hold on this is a whole nother process. And this is what journaling is for. It's the E in M.E.N.D. And that's so that we can shift these thoughts so that our negative patterns go to here instead of going to here. Or we can even get rid of them altogether. But let's just say let's just take this negative thought, okay? Or this negative event that creates a negative emotion. We'll say that this is positive. We'll say that this is negative here. So, but what we're going to focus on right now is we're just going to focus on this right here. So most people in their life, if this is time moving along throughout the day, throughout your life, most people want to be safe. They want to be moderately stable. They want to be moderately calm. They want to be content. So anything above here is not necessarily these things. You know, it's not necessarily not, but usually the discontent and the instability happens with this negative wave emotion right here. So what happens is we'll call that blast: bored, lonely, angry, sad, stressed, tired. So what happens right now, and let's use an example of you're in the car, you just had a long day at work, and you're driving home. And something happens that upsets you. You get a telephone call, you get a text saying that someone's not going to do what they said they were going to do, they're selling out on you tonight, they're canceling their plans with you, your kids left their keys at school and they can't get into the house and you've got an hour till you get there, whatever it is, you know. So you have this negative experience or event that happens, and it creates its, you know, because of all of the negative things that have happened through your day, or even positive things, just the stress of the day has led it to where you don't have a lot of ability to deal with this situation. So what happens is, instead of it just going like this and saying, okay, well, I'll be home in an hour and they're just going to have to hang out outside, what happens is you get upset. You may get angry, you may get stressed. And that's when, at this point, is when people make bad decisions for their health. And just lingering here at this crest and just allowing it to stew will actually create distress and disharmony in your life. When really you should be trying to decompress, instead you're doing the opposite of that. Or you might make a bad decision and you might decide that what you're going to do is smoke a cigarette. Even though you're trying to smoke, I'm not going to stop smoking today because I'm just too stressed out. Or I'm going to go through McDonald's and get some crappy food because it'll make me feel better for a minute because of the salt and the fat, and just the act of putting this food in my stomach will diminish my stress. So instead of doing a positive behavior, and instead of having an awareness, you just drive straight to McDonald's, or you just start smoking a cigarette, and then you smoke another one and another one and another one. You chain smoke all the way home. So anyway, that's happened because of this peak here. So Peter Osario is a psychologist, and he has a concept, and basically the concept is called actor observer, and critic. So in this process, the best one that you can be, most cases, unless you really need to take action, is to be an observer. But this doesn't necessarily come naturally. Most people, what they do is they become a critic or an actor. And we'll look at the good scenario first. So with observer comes awareness. Not so much with critic or actor. So let's say that in order for you to get back to the present moment, to get back to baseline of being safe, stable, calm, content, simple, stronger person, in order for you to be where you want to be, instead of being in this negative wave, what you need is awareness. The challenge is achieving the awareness before you implement the negative behavior from the blast response. So, what most people do, let me grab my purple pen here. What most people do is they act here, or they become a critic here, or they do both. What you want to do is, and then, so let's just look at this for a second. So an actor would be the scenario of this happening, them feeling this internal struggle, and then they go to McDonald's and they get the crap food. So what they're doing is they're acting. So we can also take the situation of the kid that forgot his keys at home, and now calling you on the way home and saying, hey, I'm locked out of the house, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do about it? So at that point, you may become a critic. You may tell yourself that this kid always does this, and they had a spare key, and the spare key was outside, and I asked them where that was at, and now this key that was outside is also stuck inside the house. So even though I tried to lead them and be prepared, they couldn't even do that right, you know? So what happens is you start becoming a critic. And at some point, you may or may not realize down here, after the harm has already been done, after you've had this negative interaction with your kid and they can sense this, or you just put this crap food into your stomach, and now instead of nourishing yourself when you get home, you've already poisoned yourself, and you don't even want to eat good food when you get home because you're full with this unnutritious food. And that's because you were an actor or a critic, or sometimes both. And then you may have an awareness after you do this behavior, but it's better if the awareness comes before, if it happens before the action. So what you want to do is you want to focus on being an observer, and actually, so what happens here is, this is what most people do. So what you want to do is you want to become the observer first, and not do this. So if you become the observer, then you can have an awareness, a heightened level of awareness, and then what you can do is you can actually get back here without implementing this negative blast behavior. So the question is, how do you become an observer? And I feel that there are, one way is through experience, right? You can say, I'm going to learn from my mistakes. But the thing is this person who just had this negative interaction with their kid, or just pulled into McDonald's because of the stress response dealing with the blast, they've had this experiences hundreds of times throughout their life, or similar ones. thousands of times, and they keep making the same decisions. So just because you have experience doesn't mean that you're actually going to make better decisions once you actually have an awareness of it after your actor or critic takes over. So that's why I suggest that you journal, and that you educate yourself on yourself. Because what this does is this gives you a deeper level of awareness of what it is that you're trying to achieve in your life and what it is that you really want. And it forces you later on in the day, if you're doing this at nighttime, to kind of take a look at these waves and what it is that you did, and also how it is that you can improve next time. So one is you have to journal. Two is you have to have an awareness that you should even be an observer. So we'll put that observer. So just this right here, just the discussion and the intellectual process of realizing that you don't have to act when something stressful happens. You don't have to be a critic. All you have to do is observe. And I can give an example of that from personal scenario. Is say if I'm in a relationship with somebody, and this has been an experience I've had before, and every so often we would get into an argument in the car over whatever, and arguments in the car never seem to go well for me, and it seems that they just escalate and escalate and escalate, and I'm trying to get my point across. I'm trying to be a critic. I'm trying to tell you that this is the reason you should feel this way. And you're trying to do the same thing. So you're trying to be a critic to me, and you're trying to persuade me of what it is that you're feeling. And then we end up criticizing each other, and then it escalates and escalates, and it's never satisfying, and it's never a very functional process. So at some point, I decided that I am no longer going to fight in the car. And I did this after I learned about this actor, observer, critic thing. And I said, you know what, from now on, anytime something stressful occurs, anytime a wave happens of either thought and emotion, or an event or experience happens that causes me this wave type escalated emotion, negative emotion, the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything, before I act or criticize or pass judgment or even try and figure it out, I'm just going to observe. I'm going to observe the person sitting next to me. I'm going to try and figure out the position that they're coming from, even before they tell me. I'm going to observe the energy that I'm feeling and observe this wave occurring into me and feel these things. And I'm going to try to not be a critic, and I'm going to try to not act, especially act negatively, unless the situation warrants it, which it seldom does in that scenario. So at this point, I become an observer. So something happens and I say something and it's taken the wrong way, and they decide that they need to argue that point with me. And if you're calm and you're just observing the situation, it allows you to respond much more effectively. Your level of calmness may increase their anxiety or it may decrease it. But that's not really what you're trying to do here. What you're trying to do is just be the best version of you in this wave, and to try and get back to the present moment. And the quickest route back to the present moment is to be an observer, to have awareness. And you may need to act. If you act, you may be acting here. Very seldom do you need to be a critic, because this is this is really negative and very seldom beneficial. So, but here if you're an actor, after you're an observer and you have awareness, then what happens is your actions are actually positive actions. They have a rationale behind them. They can be stated of, this is the reason that I feel that I need to do this, and very seldom does it even lead to another wave type of a scenario. It usually just leads to here, and then you get on with your life. Now, I know that this is kind of, let me put this guy's name, Peter Osario, and he's actor, observer, critic. The name of the book is The Behavior of Persons. I think it came out in like 2006. So anyway, so let me give you a different wave and show you what happens with most people. So we'll go back to the same thing. This is time. This is present moment. There are many people that never even reside here. What they're doing is they're in the past, or they're in the future. They're hardly ever in the present. So what happens is they have a wave, and instead of the wave going back down to the present moment, they have another wave here, and then another wave here. So an example of this would be, say you're driving in your vehicle, and there's a lot of traffic outside, and everybody's driving bad, of course, everybody but you. And there's somebody that just comes up on your ass. They're just flying, you know? And then right before they hit your back bumper, they swerve over, and then they swerve back into the slow lane for absolutely no reason, just go right around you. So what happens is this is an experience or an event that causes a thought. You're fearful, you're aggravated, you're angry at this guy. So it causes this emotion, and here you have this wave. So now you're just stewing. So then you go down the road a little bit further, and now you come up to somebody, and it's 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and they're going like 35 miles an hour. So now here's another event that causes another emotion, and it happens again. So then you go down the road further, and now you catch a red light, and then you catch another red light, and then you catch another red light, and this always happens to you. So you're just angry about that, you know? So it's just like one thing after the other, and then you finally get home, right? So this is your whole trip home. So you never actually make it back to a feeling of calm, content, presence. You just have one thing after the other. So then you get home, and we can just continue from there. There's dishes in the sink, and then somebody's on the TV and you want to watch your TV show, and somebody drank the last beer and didn't replace it, and there's dishes in the sink and the whatever, you know. So it's just like, I probably already even said that. So it's just like one thing after the other. So to go back to solving these things is that if you can increase your awareness, and you can be an observer. You could have stopped this wave after the first scenario of the person coming up on your ass. Like, you don't know what's going on with that person. You don't know if some people are just bad drivers. It doesn't mean that you need to be a critic of them. It doesn't mean that you need to act and slam on your steering wheel and honk and be aggressive and get on their ass too. It doesn't mean you need to act. You can just be an observer, have an awareness of this, and to realize that for you to be an actor or a critic is actually only harming yourself. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help you achieve your goal of health and happiness and well-being. It doesn't get you back to the present moment. And what it surely doesn't do is it doesn't get you gratitude. Whoops. Wrong. And gratitude is the key. You can't have gratitude when you're in the wave. You can only have gratitude when you're in this present moment. So if you're always looking at the past, or looking at the future, or if you're always pissed off in a blast scenario and making bad decisions to your health, it's hardly ever that you get here to be here. So there are a few ways to be gratitude, because gratitude equals happiness. If you don't have gratitude, you're probably not happy. If you're not in the present moment, you probably don't have gratitude. If you don't have awareness and an observation of yourself, then you don't have the present moment. So that means that the key, in order for you to be healthy, happy, have wellness and well-being, is that you must learn how to be an observer and to have awareness. And to figure out how it is that you can get yourself out of these negative waves instead of having them like that. Sometimes the waves are just going to crest. But once you get good at this process, then what happens is the observer actually diminishes almost all of the negative waves. And that's why you see people that some people are just calm, and it's not because they're calm people. They're calm because they have learned how to become observers of themselves and to have an awareness and to get themselves back to the present time so that they can limit these. These are not just necessarily people with anger disorders. This is everybody. This is you. This is me. I have been in a million waves in my lifetime. But I can tell you that throughout me increasing my being an observer and having an awareness and educating myself on a regular basis and going through this day in, day out for months and, for probably about 2 years now, very seldom do I have a wave that looks like this. And almost never do I have a wave that looks like this, and then looks like this, and then goes up and escalates and escalates and escalates. Because I know that once I get to here, my job is to be an observer. Anytime I feel this and I feel this blast response, that I need to act, or I need to be a critic, because of this, anytime I feel that, I immediately stop. I stop any action and I become an observer. And then what I do is I have an observer of myself, of everything that's going on. I create an awareness of what it is. I take an inventory of how it is I'm feeling and what it is that this wave that's occurring right now, because it's occurring. You can't stop it. Once it starts, and like I said, most of these are just thoughts. So you could be sitting there and just out of nowhere, you have a thought that reminds you of the past or reminds you of the future. It reminds you of the future that you wanted but you don't think you're going to get, the future that you want but you're afraid to go put yourself in a position for, the past that's failed you, that you have fear and regret and sorrow over, you know. So these things occur in your mind, and that's when the waves occur. That creates the emotions, which creates the crest, which for most of your life created a blast response. But if you become an observer and you have awareness, you can stop this blast response and you can prevent yourself from driving through that McDonald's. You can prevent yourself from blowing up at your kid or your spouse. But you can't do it until you become this. Now, present moment, presence, present mindedness. This is a whole nother subject, which we won't get into in this video, but Eckhart Tolle is, he's an author, he is a philosopher, and there are TED Talks with Eckhart Tolle that you can TED on YouTube. And I would recommend that you go on here and at least kind of review his philosophy and his stance on present-mindedness. Also, if you go to TED Talks, you can look for a Buddhist monk. I can't remember the guy's name, but just search TED Talk happiness, TED Talk gratitude, monk gratitude, and he will tell you that he will tell you some things about gratitude that will further trigger your desire to actually want to get into this present-minded state and to have gratitude and presence and just an awareness of what's going on right now. And what happens is that will diminish these negative thoughts that are past-oriented or future-oriented. It'll bring you further into the present. It'll bring you, and then gratitude is an active process. So gratitude is an active process, and when you learn how to actually practice gratitude and achieve gratitude, then you will also have increased health and wellness. And also I suggest drinking water and mending yourself.